Connecticut, which, as you know, is a coastal town. And we have a south end and west end and east end that are, lined by the coast of Long Island Sound. And they are threatened every time it rains a lot, it winds a lot, or there's a high tide at the same time as there's a hurricane. There's every time I walk into my factory, which is down on the south end, it's right near Seaside Park. I know when it's been raining because I have to wear my high water boots to get into the factory door. Flooding, both inland with one of our rivers and with the coastal areas, is well known. And Rebecca worked on a project for several years for Resilient Bridgeport, which had to do with looking at some of the mitigations that could go on to prevent this flooding. It has endangered sections of our city that are most historic. And we have University of Bridgeport, which is right on the Sound, threatened all the time. And we have several power plants, which of course have been discussed and talked about and protested against over the years. They're all right on the ocean. So flooding is probably the biggest that we see every day. Another threat that we see every day is I-95 and all the pollution that comes in from traffic. That cuts right across the city. And so we are a town that has a lot of asthma, a lot of health issues that are resulting from that, as well as we have a major power plant that is a waste-to-energy plant, our RESCO plant, and few folks who live near it, as well as the entire coastal community, have been demonstrating against that for years as well. So when we talk about what are some of our challenges and the climate impacting in our area, we can talk about many, many issues, probably flooding the most.
Adrienne, you want to add a few thoughts to strategies for mitigation?
In Bridgeport, we've been at this since 2008 when we had a Big Beam by 2020 initiative, which launched many of the things that have been going on here for the past 15, 20 years. So I just want to mention that one of the things that has come out of all of the different efforts that we had across this plan is that our communications and the grassroots participation has tripled, if not quadrupled in that time, so that when we're talking about master plans, zoning, any of the mitigation plans that have been proposed and evaluated by the community, there has been a lot of community input. And I think communications is one of the things that we talk about when we're talking about mitigation and talk about restoring after any kind of storm. It's part of what we need to do to both mitigate and to remediate. So the strength of our local communities and what we can do to give them more knowledge and more ways of expressing themselves in the projects that are proposed, I think is kind of the basic. It's foundation of how we're going to be able to deal with climate change over time. As an example, we have, go back to the South End as one example. We do have bioswale. We've been talking about a berm. We've been talking about elevating certain parts of the roadway to create that berm. The community has been involved all the way along in that discussion. And so the community learns as it's going through these decision-making processes. And I think that's as important a lesson for our communities as anything that can be gained from these exercises. And this particular discussion, I think, will probably be going on for years. I'm glad this is a kickoff, but it certainly isn't the end because, all of the different working groups that you mentioned, each one of them has pages and pages of recommendations and backup rationale for those recommendations. And I think for our communities to learn about all of that is a big step in the right direction of finding the resolution to our climate problems. Talk about sustainable Connecticut, because
Sure.
if people are looking for ways to organize their community to address these issues, I think Sustainable Connecticut is fabulous. There are 10 major chapters that any group that would be get together to address sustainability in their community would be looking at everything from the water, anything from water to community planning, infrastructure systems. I'm reading off some of the things that they have in terms of their titling, and well-stewarded land and natural resources. It's a real compendium of all the things you should be looking at in your community to see what you should be doing and getting people who are involved in each one of those and action that you can take in each one of those chapters. So I can only suggest that we've done this in Bridgeport, just started recently, but our neighbors in Fairfield, Trumbull, and Stratford have been at it for a year or so, and it yields a real measure of planning for the community and communication amongst community members. Every municipality has a whole series of plans they put out, 1 a year, 2 a year, 3 a year. Right now, Bridgeport is finishing up its zoning plan that'll be published in about 6 months or 8 months. When we participate in that process, in those hearing processes, we make sure that when we're talking about economic development, when we're talking about parks and recreation, when we're talking about zoning, we are also putting in our 2 cents worth about how that affects or how climate change affects that. So I think the leitmotif here has to always be that we have climate change in the back of our mind, so that when we're talking about the critical issues and the plans that are coming up to guide ourselves forward, these issues are taken into account, which is kind of how we started with our Be Green 2020 plan, which is now to be torn up, and we have a Be Green 2040 plan, but that is to make sure that all of our regional and local planning takes into account every single facet of the climate change issue.